Iran's missile attack into Israel and Israel's invasion into Lebanon has many wondering what comes next. The U.S. came out firmly in support of Israel. Let's listen to what Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, had to say.
Obviously, this is a significant escalation by Iran, a significant event, and it is equally significant that we were able to step up with Israel and create a situation in which no one was killed in this attack in Israel, so far as we know at this time. We are now going to look at what the appropriate next steps are to secure, first and foremost, American interests, and then to promote stability to the maximum extent possible as we go forward.
The Pentagon also said it helped Israel and fired about a dozen interceptors at Tuesday's barrage of Iranian ballistic missiles fired at Israel. The U.S. has military spread throughout the region. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian defended the attack, calling it a, quote, decisive response in defense of Iranian interests and citizens. Here with us to walk through the fog of war is Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute, Trita Parsi. Thanks for joining us. So,
thank you.
An alarming turn of events, but there were strikes, similar strikes that occurred in the springtime of this year that really didn't lead to anything. Is there really anything different about this moment, given that we are still post 1 year in now since the attacks in Gaza and in Israel by Hamas? How has the tone differed in just the 6 months since the attacks happened in the springtime?
These are very different attacks because what you saw here was that the Iranians used completely different missiles, hypersonic missiles, and the video footage of it itself shows that they penetrated Israel's air defenses, what appears to at least half of those missiles. They were targeting military sites, and this is part of the reason why we don't know that much about the damage that these missiles did, because at the end of the day, the Israelis use military censorship and do not allow reporting on how much damage was done, how many people died, etc., on these different sites. And it may very likely be that no one actually got killed. But this is very different. In April, you saw them shooting about 300 projectiles. The vast majority of them were really slow-moving drones. The vast majority of them were shut down. 9 missiles went through the Israeli air defenses. This time around, it seems to be quite a number higher than that. The Israelis clearly admit that this was something quite beyond what happened in April. But what is also a bit worrisome is that the Israeli politicians are talking about this as the greatest opportunity they have had in 50 years to transform the Middle East. So you have a country that has been attacked by 200 missiles, of course, after itself has been killing scores and scores of people in Lebanon and Gaza, and then sees the attack as the greatest opportunity in 50 years to escalate matters further. That's why this is such a dangerous situation.
We heard last night from Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance that he would support Israel's right to strike Iran further. If the Democratic side of the aisle disagrees, they certainly did not say that in explicit enough terms for me to understand that they have some different policy. Is there a chance that Biden is going to, rein them in to any degree? Do we even know where Biden is or what he's doing or if he's awake? These are very frightening moments for global security and world peace, and I am not seeing that we have an administration with any tendency to engage in restraint.
I think you're quite right, Robert. I think it's actually a very legitimate question, as comical as it may sound, as to whether anyone is at charge at the White House. You had a situation in which first the White House leaks that the president is really fuming and angry that the Israelis escalated in Lebanon. And then 2 days later, you have a report in Politico in which 2 White House officials in charge of Middle East policy apparently were encouraging the Israelis to do the very same escalation that apparently Biden was fuming about. Now, what this does is that it actually has more or less killed the confidence that America's allies in Lebanon, the very same entities that hate Hezbollah, that are really on bad terms with Iran, they feel utterly betrayed. They don't want their country to become the arena for yet another Israeli invasion. They believe, perhaps against all wisdom, that the Biden administration was actually trying to prevent that. And then later on, after Israel strikes Lebanon and what is considered a success because they took out Hezbollah, the White House comes out and says, actually, we were secretly supporting and encouraging Israel to do this. This is a situation in which people everywhere are asking themselves, who's in charge? And does it matter? Because it doesn't seem like this administration is in the habit of actually telling the truth about these matters.
Well, leaks often happen to papers, and Politico is often a gossip paper as much as it's a newspaper. Unnamed sources can have. I don't think it's going to determine the policy or how our allies approach the Biden administration. I mean, he has been in talks. This is a Netanyahu problem, correct? But with that being said,
no, it's not.
It's not a Netanyahu problem?
I would have to disagree with you.
Really?
I would disagree with you respectfully.
He is not listening to anybody.
Without a doubt, Netanyahu is a problem. I don't disagree with that at all. But to try to say that the United States does not have leverage, that the president of the United States cannot say no to Netanyahu, I think is just fundamentally wrong. And it's fundamentally a disservice to the U.S. itself to accept such a notion. And even if Biden had said no and Israel didn't listen, then we could perhaps say perhaps Biden couldn't stop it. But how do we then explain that since October 7th, we have given Israel billions and billions and billions of dollars of weapons, political support, diplomatic support, to do all the things that we apparently say we don't want them to do? At that point, it's no longer feasible to say that this is a Netanyahu problem. This is as much a Biden problem.
Well, I agree with you on that, for sure. But we should absolutely be cutting off the supply chain to Netanyahu, who's using it as his own, at his own way. I mean, it's his way right now, and it doesn't seem like, especially after the UN conversations. I mean, we are not even a few days after he spoke before the UN, and there were all these backdoor meetings to try to facilitate some sort of ceasefire or some sort of calming down, to the point where we even thought Iran was trying to de-escalate. And here we are 2 days later, 3 days later, after every single report was saying Iran didn't want to get into this, and here they are. So what was it in the last couple of days that changed, Iran's at least public persona when it came to de-escalating the situation?
I think that's a very important question. And I would point to three things that I believe caused the calculation on the Iranian side to change. One is that Jared Kushner came out with a very long tweet in which he essentially praised the Israelis for the assassination of Hezbollah, viewed it as a masterful success, and essentially said, here's an opportunity now to transform the Middle East. And I'm sure the viewers of Rising is quite sensitive, as they should be, to any language coming from Washington politicians talking about transforming the Middle East or any other region outside of the United States. What Kushner essentially was signaling, that, or the way I think it was read in Tehran, is that the Trump camp viewed this as a success and as something that should be pushed forward further by taking the war all the way to Iran's own doorsteps. Then you had Netanyahu issuing a video message purportedly to the Iranian people, but it was in English with English subtitles, in which he essentially said that there will be regime change soon in Iran. He had issued similar videos to the Lebanese people before he bombed Lebanon, similar videos to the people in Gaza before he bombed Gaza. That, I think, added the Iranian conclusion that Israel was actually about to attack Iran anyways. And then finally, the realization or the added evidence that despite all of the talk that Biden is trying to prevent escalation, he actually is not doing that. At least some of the team members he has at the White House seems to be encouraging Israel to do so. And as a result, unless Iran strikes back, the narrative will be that Iran is now a paper tiger, Hezbollah is lost, and as a result, it actually is rather cost less for Israel to escalate matters further, and the U.S. should be on board with that. I think the Iranians reacted in order to change that narrative and reassert the idea that any war with Iran would actually be extremely costly to all sides.
Trita Parsi, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.